David. I'm looking forward today to hearing your views on the latest trends in the TMS market. My first question is, what are the general trends in the TMS market?
Thank you, Dustin. I certainly appreciate the opportunity to speak with you today. The transportation software market is a very mature one. And as much as it is mature and been around for 30 years, it's really very active today. And a couple of reasons why. If you think historically about the TMS space, these projects, 6 to 12 to 18 months long, very large, often $1 million plus investments, really only projects that could be justified by the larger shippers. And by larger, I mean companies that spend 75, 100 million or more each year in freight spend. That being said, that market is largely saturated. But the mid-sized shippers and the smaller shippers really haven't had the opportunity to take advantage of the TMS technology. And when cloud TMS came along 7, 8, 9 years ago, it certainly opened up the market to some of the mid-sized shippers. But what we're seeing today is a huge growth in demand in the small and mid-sized business market for TMS. And we're starting to see new solutions come out in the marketplace that are really very much catered towards them and their requirements, which are very different than what the larger shippers really need.
Well, what are the implications for the growth within the small and medium-sized business demand for the TMS?
Sure, that's a great question. There's a couple implications. The first one really comes around cost. It's much easier to scale up than it is to scale down, and the TMSs that have been around for a long time are very good at the large, complex problems with a lot of optimization and, quite frankly, a lot of PhDs doing work to help you figure out how to configure that optimization. The reality is, if you're spending 10, 20, even $30 million a year on freight, there isn't that much opportunity for freight savings. There usually isn't that much opportunity for consolidation and optimization. The benefits that these companies are looking for are some level of freight savings due to optimization, but also a lot of benefits of savings due to process automation, consistency, and visibility. That's a very different kind of system in terms of how you design it, how you engineer it, how you deploy it, and how you maintain it over the long run. So really, those implications come down to both the cost. It can't be nearly as expensive, or even proportionally as expensive as some of the traditional TMSs. But then also, it puts a whole new focus really on usability of the TMS.
Well, how is usability viewed differently today than it was 5 or 7 years ago?
Yeah, that's also a good question. I think historically, in all of supply chain, not just TMS, so much focus by software vendors, and I'm guilty of this as well, has been really on feature and function and science and math. And every release, it was all about cramming in as much new capability as possible, adding flags, adding bells, adding whistles, and so forth. But the problem is all these features and functions increase complexity. I'll give you an example. Let's say I happen to have maybe 100 flags. I'm sorry, Dustin. I'm gonna have to. I lost my number there. We'll have to cut that back out. But all these additional features and flags greatly introduce complexity, and it's common today if you think about the systems with the hundreds of flags, having really billions of different permutations and combinations. It requires an incredible amount of sophistication on the user part, training by the software vendor, and documentation and experience on the system to really be able to use it. So I'll give you an example. If you look at some of the bigger TMS vendors today, they offer anywhere from 5 to 15 days worth of classroom training to become proficient in the system. Think about that. 15 days, that's more time than most people take in vacation per year that the vendor expects you to spend in a classroom learning the TMS to be proficient. You just can't do that in a small or mid-size business or the mid-size shipper. It's got to be a system that's very easy to use, very rapid to deploy, and quite frankly, one that doesn't intimidate and really prohibit exploration of the system and innovation of the use of the system. It's very different than it once was. Now, the other aspect of usability that's important to note as well is thinking about the users that are coming in the system. It was one thing if you had somebody who grew up in the days of the 80s and 90s in technology where you were using green screens, and client-server applications that are very sophisticated, very complex, and quite frankly, not that user-friendly. But if you think about the folks who are coming into technology today and the supply chain talent that's in there today, it's the millennials, and they're no longer coming, they're here. And they're replacing a lot of the retirees from the baby boom generation who's used to these green screens and client-server technology. They're used to Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, iPads. They're used to a whole different approach to user interface. And quite frankly, you don't need training to use Facebook, even though it's actually fairly sophisticated in how it can be used. So user interface is not only critical for how you actually can do process automation, but it's also critical for hiring and retaining critical supply chain talent.
Well, what are some of the benefits to smart user-centric design besides the obvious?
Yeah, that's a great question too. The obvious is there certainly in terms of just overall client satisfaction. But there's also studies out there that show that for software projects, very few of them actually come close to attaining the value and the benefits that were expected. But less than 1% of those who actually have said they didn't receive those benefits they expected said it was due to a lack of feature function. 70% have said that it's due to lack of user adoption. So if you have a smart user-centered design that's easy to understand and easy to adopt, you're far more likely to get the benefits that you planned on with a project than you would if you had a much more complex user interface. Above and beyond that, what happens is when you are a user and using software for the first time, you really focus on being in exploration mode. You're spending time poking around the system, figuring out how it works, and figuring out how you need to do your job. But that's when the switch flips. Once you know how to do your job, most users go into task execution mode. Simply, how do I do my job day to day? And I never really learn to use the system more than really the minimum of what I need. If you have a good user-centered design, one that's very intuitive and almost self-learning, then it becomes a different story. Then you've created a culture and an environment of exploration where it's safe to explore. And what happens is the people who know their jobs best on a day-to-day basis become the people who learn the system the best on a day-to-day basis, and in a new way are able to actually figure out how can I use the system in ways that I never had planned before. And that's really where it gets very exciting, because now you're starting to get benefits and innovation that are above and beyond anything you previously planned. It's really quite exciting and a huge kind of untapped potential for a lot of companies out there.
Thank you, David. And can you provide a brief background of yourself?
Sure. So my name is David Landau. I'm the Executive Vice President for a company called Cloud Logistics. Cloud Logistics is the newest and most innovative provider of cloud-based transportation management systems. So obviously this is a topic that I know quite well. I've been in the industry for over 20 years, having spent time with some of the largest supply chain software companies in implementation and R&D and marketing and sales, and I've most recently taken this leadership position at Cloud Logistics. Prior to being in this space, I graduated with an engineering degree from Duke University.
And thanks for sharing today.
Thank you, Dustin. It's been my pleasure.